Hi everybody, it's Harvard Lawyer Lee. Well, for those of you who are coming back to the channel, welcome. And yes, I'm in a different office. My office has a broken air conditioner and it's 80 degrees, literally 80 degrees in the office. So I decided to film somewhere else because I could not wait. We have something to talk about that's pretty much as hot as my office is, and that's saying something. That is Amber Heard's motion to set aside the verdict against her that she filed on Friday. She has an absolutely explosive, sensational new allegation in it. It's like something out of a John Grisham novel. I want to talk about it, what her evidence is, and why she would even think that was important. And then I want to talk about what her chances are. Like, is it going to make any difference? Is she going to be able to get the verdict overturned because of this? So let's start out with what the allegation is. According to Amber Heard's team, they now believe that one of the jurors was, to put it mildly, I guess, faked. That one of the jurors wasn't the person they said they were. Here's what her evidence is. She says that juror number 15 was supposedly born in 1945. She bases that on the court sending out a juror panel list that had basic demographic information about the person. And she says that person was born in 1945, they would be 77 years old, give or take a month or two, but clearly they were not 77. And looking at, quote, public information, she doesn't say what that is, but looking at public information, that person was actually born in 1970, and they're 52 years old. She doesn't explain what made her go back and look to find out when this person was born or how old they were, but let me talk a minute about why it is that Amber Heard would care about the age of the person. And there are a couple of reasons. I guess to really even unpack this, I have to sort of explain how it works when you select a jury. Because when a lawyer is picking a jury, you don't get to just pick the jurors you think would be good or would be fair to your client. It's the other way around. Instead, the judge gives you a certain number of strikes, and you have to save those carefully and use them only on the jurors you think would be most unfair to your client, most unable to see your client's point of view. And you strike those jurors, and then once you've used those up, you're left. You're stuck with whoever the remaining jurors are, even if you didn't think they were going to be great for your client. So that's why Amber Heard wants to be careful with every juror. In this particular case, I would be willing to bet that Amber Heard had done some jury focus groups or some work around what age person would be best for my case. And probably Amber was told or assuming that older jurors were going to be better for her case. That maybe older jurors would be more likely to think, women are victims of DV, men really can't be. So she might have been thinking to herself, an older juror will buy my side of the story more easily than Johnny's side. And it would be the other way around with a younger juror. That's one thing she could have been thinking. Sometimes people also may make judgments or stereotypes about an older person, concluding maybe that person wouldn't be as strong in the jury room. Maybe they would be more laid back. And I've only got one strike. So if I've got two jurors, both of whom would not be very good for my client, I'm going to strike the one I think would be most aggressive in the jury room, would be the strongest voice against me. I want to put in the person who would be not in my favor, but at least they're not going to be very, very strong against me with the other jurors. So those are the kinds of things that her team may have been thinking. But what's the underlying story behind this? The underlying story that Amber would like to be pointing out, a really ugly specter, is that somehow a juror got onto the panel who wasn't even called to jury duty. Wow, I mean, how could that happen? One thing that various news media have been running with is the idea that, well, she's accusing Johnny Depp of paying off a juror. She says nothing remotely like that in her pleadings and clearly has no evidence of that. But she wants the judge to look into it. She wants the judge to say, who is this juror? And why were they even showing up? Then it's also possible, just given the publicity around this case, that a juror might have gotten on not because anybody paid them to get on, but simply because it would be exciting. Maybe they wanted something like a book deal or publicity. Those are the sort of really kind of ugly specters that she's raising, that she's trying to suggest maybe could have happened. At least she's asking the court, investigate, find out what happened. She's not really saying that this alone would be enough, but that it's worth investigating. And she might have believed that the person could have influenced the verdict and they shouldn't have been there at all. Now, Amber's team says this raises a couple of questions. Number one, who the heck is Juror 15 and were they even called for jury duty? And then secondly, was anybody at the court checking IDs to make sure that the jurors who showed up were the ones who were summoned for jury duty? Now, Virginia Code 8.01-353.1 says that at the time of the assembly, for the purpose of jury selection, the identity of each member of the jury veneer shall be verified as provided in this section. Prior to being selected from the jury veneer, a potential juror shall verify his identity by presenting to the person taking jury attendance any of the following forms of identification, and they have three. First is a driver's license, the second is a government ID card of whatever sort, and the third is an employee ID card if it has a photo. If a juror is unable to present any ID, the statute goes on to say he shall sign a statement affirming under penalty of perjury that he is the named juror. So from that we can see that the clerk of the court is supposed to check IDs. And Amber's team says, well, the court could not have been doing that. Well, one of two things. Either the court wasn't checking at all, because then they would have seen that this isn't the same person, doesn't match, or the court checked and this person claimed they didn't have an ID. And if so, then they signed an affidavit and they falsely swore that they were that person so that they could sit on the jury pool. That would be a problem in and of itself, because that would mean the juror committed perjury in order to get onto the panel to sit on the case. Now, Amber's team is saying that they want the court to investigate that, to find out who was Juror 15, how did this happen, was there checking going on with the court? And they ask for a new trial. Now, there are two possible explanations for this. One explanation is your John Grisham novel. You know, juror bought and paid for, juror snuck on, juror had this plan, this idea, this bias in advance and wanted to do that. But there's a whole nother set of explanations that are far more likely. First of all, we don't really know much about the facts at all. We just have Amber's very short summary of it. But secondly, things like, for example, a person who lives with their father and they have the same name, and a jury summons comes and they look at it, they have the same name, they're both John Doe, and they assume it's for the younger person, not for the older person. It could just be that the juror looked older than her real age, or his real age. They do call it he. Misprint on, it could be that there was a misprint on the juror information that was sent out from the court, that it really said 1977 and they just wrote 1945 by mistake. Any of those sort of really ordinary explanations could have happened. Now let's talk about why this information, even though it is really sensational, is probably not going to buy Amber a new trial or get the verdict overturned. Here's why. First of all, the Virginia Supreme Court found that that statute that I just read to you is directory, not mandatory. What that means is it's what you're supposed to do, but it's not absolutely required that you follow that. And in fact, the statute says any error in the information shown on the jury panel shall not be grounds for a mistrial or assignable as error on appeal. So Amber's team fully admits that, but they say, well, it's still important and it's a part of due process. And they also want to, I think, raise the idea that there was misconduct going on. I think that's got to be part of what the thinking is. But Amber has a few problems. Not only does the statute say that identification is not necessary and not grounds for a new trial, but also in order to figure out whether or not anything like this happened, Amber has to convince the court to investigate. Why? Why would the court do that? Like, what would be the incentive for the court to do that and to overturn it and get a whole new trial? So that's a very hard sell to get Judge Ascarati to go in there and investigate. Third, if the person was 25 years younger than what the court document had said they were supposed to be, that was obvious to Amber from the moment the person walked in for in-person questioning. It wasn't like Amber was only allowed to look at paper. Amber's team also saw the actual members of the potential jury. So they would have seen that person, and they could have said to themselves, that person seems a little younger than I thought. They could have asked questions. They could have asked the court. They could have raised it at some point before the entire trial happened and a verdict came out against Amber Heard. So this is an absolutely fascinating new development, though, fascinating argument. I don't think it's going to get her a new trial or a judgment notwithstanding the verdict. I'll be interested in your opinions. What do you think? What do you think about it? So be sure to like the video and come back for more. Subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.